what does it mean when a game is atmospheric? When you can feel the vibe, the mood of the world that you're in. It's this incredibly powerful feeling that makes game worlds come alive. And it could be something that you want to utilize more of in your own development. Our next speaker is here to talk about how to bring atmosphere to a game. It's something he's really focused in on, and one of his most recent projects, Tori, was actually awarded a Game Devs of Color Expo grant for being that kind of atmospheric experience. So please welcome to the stage, Farfama Hargaya.
Hey everyone, today I'm going to give a talk about atmosphere in games, crafting experiences that feel alive. So to start, my name is Farfama. I'm an experimental game creator and artist. I've been making games since I was a child, but the last 5 years or so, I've been making games focused more on a kind of experiential sort of art house focus. And these are more focused on atmosphere, awe, and wonder. You can play all my games on itch.io as well. I also am making a commercial game, which received a grant from the Game Devs of Color Expo and No More Robots last year, um, which I really appreciate so much and has really kind of expanded the potential of this game. And yeah, you could wishlist that on Steam. And a lot of people, they tell me that my games, they have a lot of incredible atmosphere and they evoke a lot of strong emotions. And it makes me wonder, what is atmosphere and how do you design atmosphere in the context of games? So when you think about atmosphere, maybe you could think about a coffee shop that has a great atmosphere. So what is it about this coffee shop that has a great atmosphere? Maybe it's the subdued lighting, or the greenery, or the open doors letting you hear the chatter outside and see the sky, or perhaps it's the tin roof that makes the rain sound like music, or the puddles on the ground that reflect the light, or maybe it's the shopkeeper that talks to you on a difficult day, or the light blue door that reminds you of your grandma's house. So atmosphere is a lot of things. You could think of it like maybe this person in the middle, and everything on the outside is everything that contributes to the atmosphere. So yeah, atmosphere, and when it comes to game, it's a philosophical, psychological, physical sensation and experience that touches upon all parts of the game. It's the code, it's the art, it's the narrative. Everything contributes to the atmosphere in some way. So this is just like a low-level look of what atmosphere is. Um, and you could think of it like a tool set to sustain immersion. This is something that designer Greg Kasavin talks about in one of his GDC talks as well. So a lot of the core concepts on the previous slide could really be distilled down to these six things. And these are things I think about when I make games and things I think about when I play other games. And I just want to emphasize that these are coming from myself, who is a solo developer, and it's really targeted to other solo devs and small teams that might not really think about these things as much since they're juggling multiple hats. So what I'm hoping for is to maybe spark some thoughts as you're making your games, and maybe you want to make your games more atmospheric. So we'll start with sound design. So, things like ambient noise, music, or silence, they all set an emotional tone and define the space and the shape of your atmosphere. So to start, footsteps, they sound different on various materials, probably not a big surprise. But, they also sound different based on the speed that you walk and the pressure and angle of your footsteps. So of course, you don't need to have like an advanced simulation system. It's just good to have a nice wide variety of variations of footsteps, and maybe even just randomizing them is more than enough. And when it comes to seamless, like ambient loops, such as like wind and ocean, seamlessly looping them can really be a really big, like easy step to really, keep your players immersed in an atmosphere. So this first example, it kind of seamlessly loops from the end to the beginning using a crossfade, compared to the second one, which is like it has a silence at the end. So there's a very hard cut. And it's again really noticeable when it comes to like sounds that just exist in the atmosphere, like wind and ocean. And this could be easily fixed with audio editing tools. I use Audacity to fix these problems all the time. And of course, you could always use audio filters to simulate sound in different spaces. Um, so if you're in a wide open space like a cavern, the sound's going to be long. It's going to have a long echo and high reverb. Or maybe you're in a small cramped space like a home, which has less reverb and echo, and it's more muted sound with higher clarity. So game engines are really good at doing this. And could even use like middleware to help you with this as well. And then we have soundscapes. So soundscapes, they shape a game's atmosphere by immersing the player in a world that feels alive beyond their immediate view. So let's look at this picture. So imagine maybe you're outside or maybe you're playing a game. So maybe let's like take 10 seconds to think about like what are the sounds that you hear when you look at this picture? So yeah, so I imagine you thought about maybe the winds or the water, or maybe the trees. So there are tons of sounds, of course, in this environment, and there's variations of each sound too. So of course, there's all these birds, stellar jays, woodpeckers, hummingbirds. Maybe there's different variations of the branches that are creaking or the trees that are creaking. The water could have splashes from different fish jumping around, or the wind could really affect all these sounds in different ways. So yeah, going back to the previous points, using a middleware or using a game engine, you could use sound mixers to really heighten that sense of immersion simply by having a unique soundscape and a varied soundscape. And finally, embrace silence. I think this is something you don't see in a lot of games. And this is from my favorite game, Dear Esther. And the sound designer and composer Jessica Curry makes this point in the developer commentary about how just a lot of games are really loud and there's just constant flashes, not just games, but just media in general. Um, they're always trying to like get your attention constantly, and you can never just silently sit in an environment. So yeah, just embrace silence. You could be quiet in your games. You see this in other atmospheric games like Eco and Shadow of the Colossus. Yeah, so that's sound design. So those are a few tips. Next, I want to talk about environment design. So this environment design shapes the atmosphere through the player's interaction with the visual perception within the world. So one really easy way of doing this is using environmental storytelling. So just using props placed in unique ways can, really spark a player's imagination. And you can tell whole stories just with the right combination of objects. Like this is the image I took on a walk. It's a Hello Kitty speaker next to a book. And just looking at it, I have all these questions in my head and stories about how these two objects came together. So again, two objects just placed next to each other is enough to tell a huge story. And this is from a game, this is from Lost Records, and they use environmental storytelling really well. Like their environments are really cluttered and full of character, and you could just tell whole stories about the world just by observing all the objects next to each other. And this has become a bit of a trope in the 3D Fallout games, where skeletons kind of have random objects placed around them, which is funny to see. And a lot of your environments can contain tons of motion. So life is full of motion, and movement can make your games feel dynamic and alive. So this is from Ghost of Tsushima. And if you just look at this picture, I mean, maybe I should have had a video, but just by just looking at the picture, though, you could tell the grass is waving. There's like deers running in the background. The character's cape is waving as well. There's a huge billow of smoke in the background. There's a little river with flowing water. So you don't have to make your worlds static. Just adding movements, even subtle movement, is enough to really keep it alive. And you should explore various materials. So every material has their own properties that can suggest a tone of an environment and symbolize themes or moods. So rust and stone, for example, can signify like ancient, decaying feeling, or maybe polished metal can signify power and control. So every material interacts with light and perception in interesting ways and can evoke subtle emotions. So try to use materials with intention and reward curiosity and exploration. So your world doesn't need to be completely empty. You could fill it with unique objects that are hand placed with care. And these items that you place, they don't have to be tied to like a point-based reward system for finding them. You could just make the reward simply, you could reward the player's curiosity with a unique experience. And also try to avoid game engine smell. So I define this as kind of symptoms that suggest a deeper technical issue or inefficiency in the game engine. So these are kind of hard to solve. I mean, I'm a developer. I understand that I run into these issues all the time. These can be like really big atmosphere breakers because they're essentially kind of like fourth wall breaking. Things like Z fighting, for example. This is a picture of Z fighting. It's when two planes kind of intersect with each other, and there's kind of this jittering, flickering effect. This is usually when objects are super close to each other. But you could solve that with vertex snapping or just being very mindful about placing your objects. Other problems like light leaking, there's jittering physics, pop-in. Yeah, again, these could be kind of difficult to solve, but maybe you don't even know they exist. Maybe you're so kind of deep into development or you just kind of don't notice them at all. So maybe get people to play test your game and notice these things, and perhaps maybe they're actually easy to solve. And yeah, next I want to talk about player character embodiments. And this refers to design choices that remind the players that their character has a physical presence within the game. So you're not just like an embodied floating camera. This concept's really impactful in first-person games where visual and mechanical cues emphasize the character's actions and reactions. So one of my favorite games is Half-Life 2, and I think it's a really bold choice that they decided to be completely in one perspective at all times. So it doesn't even like if there's a big moment happening, the camera won't even like shift towards it. So they're really committed to keeping you embodied and within the characters, within or you having full control over the character's view. Um, and another great example is embodied presence. And these are kind of surreal kind of um, images or reminders that your character exists in the world. So this is from Metroid Prime, and when you shoot a laser against the wall, your visor will light up, showing a reflection of your character within it. So yeah, you get this surreal embodied feeling through it. And the games like Mirror's Edge, they did a lot of work to make you, you really feel the wind on your character, the impact from falling from a high height. And there's all these subtle animations and screen effects that really make you feel like you embody this character. And visual effects as well when they interact with the player's interactions. So just like an example, this is from BioShock. When you walk through like water, you'll get a full screen kind of wavy effect that happens. And this happens, there's many examples in many games, but I think it's really great when the visual effects actually interact with the player. So yeah, next I'll talk about game state. These are things like loading, game over, main menu, pause, cutscene. These are essentially transition states between gameplay. These can be really jarring to suddenly put into one. Again, kind of like fourth wall breaking, reminding you that, okay, yeah, you're playing a video game, things are loading, transitions are happening, but you don't have to make them feel jarring. You can make your game state grounded in the game world. This is an example from the first Prey game. Instead of a game over screen, it's kind of like it turns into a little game that you have to play where you're sent to this astral world where you have to kill these kind of these like spirit enemies to revive yourself. So yeah, it is like a game over state, but the state exists in the gameplay. And this is from Prince of Persia 2008. When you die, your companion will lift you up and return you to a platform. So you can't really die. There's no game over. This was really controversial at the time, but I thought it was really great because it just kept the game flow continuing. And there was a narrative reason for it. She had these magical powers that allowed this to happen. And then when it comes to loading screens, again, they can't really be avoided, but you can try to minimize them or make them visually interesting. So this is No Man's Sky, and when you warp to a new solar system, you get this kind of evocative visuals of you transporting through a wormhole. And maybe sometimes you might have design or technical constraints that prevent you from doing the previous examples. But I think something as simple as just having some key arts in the corner instead of a loading level text or a loading spinner, you could maybe just have the art, a piece of art that kind of has this interesting loading animation or something like that. I think that is even like a lot better than being very explicit about your state. Or you could just avoid state completely, like all my games. This is one of my games called The Golden Tower, and you just launch right into the experience. There's no main menu, there's no really anything. It just the game starts immediately. So I try to avoid that completely. I know with game certification, you might have to have like a title screen so I can get away with this, but if you have a chance to get away with it, I recommend it. It's a fun way to jump into a game. And then next, I want to talk about narrative design. So narrative design, I admittedly, I'm not the best at narrative design. My partner actually helps me a lot with this. But I do have some opinions on it when it comes to atmosphere. Uh, so when it comes to narrative design, instead of um, instead of listing all the features of your game like it's a sales pitch, maybe you could be a little weird with your game. Um, Of course, this won't work if you rely on publisher to market your game or you care about sales. Luckily, I don't have to care about sales with my game. But this is from a game called Senses or Sens by Limasse 5. I hope I pronounced that right. And it's just a bunch of like cryptic Morse code. So it's really set this mysterious tone before you even launch the game. And all my games also do something similar. They're kind of these cryptic poems that are written by my partner Shivani. And I want all my games to really feel like you stumble upon something like in a back alley listed on like no map that's owned by a strange shopkeeper that doesn't speak to you. That's a tone that I want to set with all my games. And these are from some of my other games. This is The Light of Our Yearning, which I just released, and First Person Anomaly. And when it comes to narrative design, I personally like games that don't give too much exposition. Uh, I like games that feed the player's imagination. They let them fill in the details and make stories in their head. I prefer games that provide a spark, but not the flame. Um, I personally don't think players like care about like long, deep rambles about every little detail of the characters and the world and the backstory and their motivations. I think discovering the lore on your own is where a lot of the enjoyment lies. So giving all the answers kind of ruins that magical feeling of curiosity and discover. And lastly, I want to talk about user interface. So I love it when games have diegetic UIs. So this is UI that exists in the game world. So this is from Shadow of the Colossus. And instead of having like a map marker that it always exists on the screen, you could lift up your sword and it'll tell you where the next Colossus or boss fight is. And a classical example is Dead Space games, which have the health bar on your character suit. So I think you're seeing that a lot in more recent games too. And this is from Firewatch, where map navigation is like an actual physical map that you have to view. And this also happens in the Metro games, where your objective list is on a clipboard that you hold in your hand. So yeah, I think it's great when you keep your menus minimal. Um, Shadow of the Colossus has almost no UI at all. Um, it's just you, your horse, and kind of the environment, as opposed to maybe something like this, which is just full of all these objectives and notifications. It could be overwhelming. This kind of feels like you're playing a game while browsing your phone. So I prefer to design and play games like this that look like this and try to avoid games like this. Of course, maybe you can't avoid that. Maybe you're making like a gotcha game or something and you have to do that. I don't know. But if you can make an atmospheric game, I would try to go for something a little more subtle. So yeah, that covers all the main points that I want to make, and I hope these are just a few tips. There's so much more examples and ideas that you can get inspiration from a lot of games. But there's another point that I want to talk about, and that's emergent atmosphere. So emergent atmosphere is something I'm trying to strive to do in my latest game, and this is kind of atmosphere that feels organic. It's not planned, but instead it's like an interaction of many systems, which creates new systems. So kind of similar to Rube Goldberg Machine or like games like Dwarf Fortress. So an example, maybe there's a rainstorm that fills a bucket, and then the bucket attracts insects and birds, or maybe and then the birds start eating the insects. And maybe this bucket will only fill with water if it's in an open space. So yeah, so interactions with interactions within interactions that organically create a new atmosphere. Another example, maybe there's a forest that sets on fire, and the fire maybe causes animals to leave the forest area and go to a new area, which changes the kind of ecosystem with there's new prey and there's uh, new predators. So yeah, and maybe the forest, the destroyed fire just stays in the environment. And all that is all random depending on where the lightning strikes. So these are the kind of systems that I would love to see more in games, and something that I want to design more as well. Yeah, so in the end, what I do want to also say is that atmosphere is very personal. It's a very subjective thing. Things that I like, maybe you don't dislike, maybe you dislike, or tips that apply to my games might not apply to yours. But what I really hope to do is help you make experiences that let your players attune themselves to the worlds that you build and appreciate the details. And the main point with atmosphere really comes down to intention. And this leads to a bigger point that creating atmosphere or atmosphere in general is it's a very political thing as well. How you feel an atmosphere depends on our unique outlook, shaped by our past experiences, cultural backgrounds, identities, and physical memories. And so to get inspired by atmosphere, what I really want to say is to engage all your senses, sight, sound, smell, touch. Just attune yourself to the environment. Be active and present because there is an infinite amount of inspiration in the world. And inspiration exists outside of playing games. So I actually kind of rarely play games now. I try to spend as much time outside as I can. 'Cause this is where I get really all my inspiration from. So yeah, just go for a long, aimless walk, and you'll find inspiration everywhere. So yeah, that sums up my talk. So again, thank you so much. You could email me farfama.dev@gmail.com. You could follow me on Blue Sky. You could play all my games on itch.io. And yeah, I want to thank Game Devs of Color Expo as well. And if you're interested in talking about atmosphere, if you're a small developer, I'd love to maybe even do some atmospheric consulting, maybe some atmospheric auditing, completely free. I think it'd be a really fun exercise in sort of analyzing and maybe enhancing your games in subtle ways. So yeah, thank you so much.
Atmosphere is such a different experience for every person, but it is powerful when you find it. For me, I kind of get dialed in actually when there are a lot of words. Like when you play a game that has little books or novellas in them, and you get to just imagine that there are tons of people who are scripting all of these stories, and it just I could read them for days. But I also really enjoy the soft spoken subtlety of something like Journey, the rose petals falling in town at the beginning of Clair Obscur Expedition 33. There are so many ways to appreciate atmosphere and what's being built in the energy of a game. So thank you for that talk, Farfama. And if you want to take Farfama up on perhaps that consulting opportunity or just want to learn more about his games, you can email him at farfama.dev@gmail.com, or you can find his games on itch at farfama.itch.io, or find him on Blue Sky at Farfama.